They said no one could control a sultan, but they were wrong. From the marble halls of Topkapi Palace to the blood-soaked whispers of the royal harem, one woman, born a captive, raised a concubine, would bend an empire to her will. Her laughter was said to charm, her gaze to wound, and her mind to rule. Her name was Hürrem Sultan, the woman who turned love into a weapon and reshaped the Ottoman world forever. The story begins not in Istanbul, but far to the north, in the cold plains of what is now Ukraine. A young girl named Alexandra Lisovska lived an ordinary life, unaware that fate had already chosen her for a throne built on secrets. Her village was raided by the Crimean Tatars, and she was dragged away, screaming, toward the slave markets that fed the Ottoman capital. Most would break under such cruelty. She did not. The girl's spirit survived, sharper than ever, hidden behind eyes that learned quickly what power truly meant. When she was brought to the harem of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, she was nothing more than another girl among hundreds, dressed in silk, trained in obedience, and told that her destiny depended on pleasing a man she would never truly know. But Alexandra was different. She smiled when others wept. She listened when others begged. And soon her laughter echoed through the marble corridors of Topkapi Palace. They called her Hürrem, meaning the cheerful one. The Sultan noticed her. How could he not? Suleiman, ruler of an empire that stretched across 3 continents, was feared by kings and loved by poets. Yet even he was disarmed by the warmth and wit of a girl who should have been broken. She spoke to him not as a slave, but as an equal. She made him laugh. She challenged his thoughts. She made him feel human. But in the Ottoman court, affection was dangerous. Love was political. Every smile, every word could shift the balance of power. And when the Sultan chose Hürrem over the others, especially over his longtime favorite, Mahidevran, he lit a fuse that would burn for decades. Whispers spread through the palace. The Sultan is bewitched. She has poisoned his heart. A slave has conquered the master. They were not entirely wrong. Hürrem was not just beautiful. She was intelligent, ambitious and fearless. She saw what others could not, that in the empire of men, the harem was the heart of power. Through charm, loyalty, and manipulation, she began to reshape the hierarchy inside those gilded walls. The other concubines hated her. The court advisors distrusted her. Even the Sultan's own mother, Valide Hafsa Sultan, grew uneasy. But Hürrem played the long game. She learned who to flatter, who to ignore, and who to destroy. One by one, her rivals fell. Suleiman broke centuries of royal tradition when he did something no sultan before him had done. He married her. Hürrem Sultan became not just his consort, but his legal wife. It was a scandal, an earthquake that shook the Ottoman world. A slave had become the queen of the empire. The marriage was more than love. It was a statement. Hürrem was no longer merely part of the harem. She was part of the state. Her influence seeped into every corner of politics. She advised Suleiman on matters of war, diplomacy, and justice. Letters she wrote to foreign rulers survive to this day, filled with charm and cunning. She addressed the King of Poland with grace, securing peace for the lands she once called home. Yet behind the silks and smiles, something darker was brewing. In the harem, every mother's ambition was tied to her son's fate. The Sultan's firstborn, Prince Mustafa, Mahidevran's son, was loved by the people, admired by the army, and seen as the rightful heir. Hürrem's sons, however, stood in his shadow. And in the Ottoman world, shadows were dangerous places. Rumors began to swirl that Hürrem and her ally, Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha, were plotting to eliminate Mustafa. Some said she whispered poison into the Sultan's ear, convincing him that his own son was planning rebellion. Others believed she merely allowed suspicion to grow, knowing the Sultan's paranoia would do the rest. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Mustafa was summoned to his father's tent. He entered proudly. His soldiers waited outside, unaware that their prince would never return. When the executioners struck, history recorded not just the death of a son, but the victory of a woman. Hürrem had secured her legacy, but at what cost? The palace was never quiet again after Mustafa's death. Even the marble seemed to echo differently, as if the stones themselves mourned what had been done. Whispers turned into silence whenever Hürrem passed. The same courtiers who once flattered her now bowed with eyes lowered, afraid to meet the gaze of a woman who had convinced a sultan to kill his own son. Yet Hürrem remained calm. She had survived the storm, but she knew another would always come. Power in the Ottoman Empire was never kept. It was borrowed, and the debt was always paid in blood. She began to use her influence more carefully, weaving a web of loyalty that stretched from the harem to the council chamber. She could no longer rely on beauty alone. She relied on information. Servants, eunuchs, and advisors whispered to her before they whispered to anyone else. Every rumor found its way to her ears. Every letter, every secret conversation, every plan. Hürrem knew it all before dawn. Through Rustam Pasha, her trusted ally and son-in-law, she placed her hand on the empire's pulse. Rustam was ruthless, brilliant, and utterly devoted to her. Together they became the shadow behind the throne, the unseen rulers of Suleiman's empire. To the outside world, she was the Sultan's beloved, the gentle mother of princes, the smiling queen who funded mosques and kitchens for the poor. But behind that image was the cold precision of a strategist who understood that mercy had no place in survival. Years passed, and the empire reached the height of its glory. Wars were won, cities conquered, wealth poured into Istanbul like a golden river. Yet inside the palace, Hürrem fought a different kind of war. The Valid Sultan, Suleiman's mother, and the only woman who could restrain her, was gone. With her death, the last restraint on Hürrem vanished. She was now the most powerful woman the Ottoman Empire had ever known. Every decision, every appointment, every alliance seemed to carry her shadow. Foreign ambassadors wrote home about the red-haired witch who commands the Sultan. European kings referred to her not as a concubine, but as the Empress of the East. They spoke of her charm, her intelligence, and her terrifying ability to make men disappear. Still, she was not untouchable. The ghosts of the harem were many, and they whispered her name at night. Mahidevran, now exiled and disgraced, still lived, and so did her hatred. Mustafa's supporters in the army murmured that Hürrem's ambition had cursed the empire, that the blood of a prince cried for vengeance. Hürrem responded not with fear, but with construction. She built monuments, mosques, schools, hospitals, fountains. Each stone was both an act of piety and a message to her enemies. I am still here. Her most famous creation rose above the skyline of Istanbul, the Haseki Hürrem Sultan complex. It was more than architecture. It was propaganda in stone, a statement that her power was sanctioned by faith itself. Even those who despised her were forced to admire her vision. Yet the one thing she could not control was time. The Sultan, once strong and passionate, was aging. His hair turned gray, his eyes tired. The fire that had united them now flickered weakly. He spent long hours alone, writing poetry filled with sorrow. In his verses, he called her my joy, my torment, and the thief of my reason. It was love. Yes, but also obsession. As Hürrem watched him change, she understood what every ruler eventually learns. Power fades fastest when the heart grows old. Her sons were now grown, and each one had inherited a fragment of her ambition. Selim, the charming but indulgent one. Bayezid, the proud and reckless one. Their rivalry threatened to ignite another civil fire. Hürrem tried to hold them together, but she could not be in every place at once. The empire she had once manipulated so skillfully began to slip beyond even her control. Illness crept in quietly. At first it was nothing, a fever, a weakness in her limbs. But soon it became clear. The woman who had survived wars of the heart and mind could not conquer her own body. In her final days, she asked to see Suleiman. They spoke for hours behind closed doors, their voices soft, their words lost to history. Some say he wept, others say she smiled until the end, calm in the knowledge that her legacy would live far beyond her body. When she died in 1558, the empire mourned, some with grief, some with relief. The Sultan ordered that she be buried beside him in the Suleymaniye Mosque, the grandest monument of his reign. No other concubine had ever been given such an honor. Even in death, she remained at his side. Centuries later, her name still divides historians. Was she a manipulative schemer who brought ruin to the Ottoman dynasty, or a visionary woman who shattered the limits placed on her and ruled from within the shadows? The truth lies somewhere in between. Hürrem Sultan was neither saint nor villain. She was power itself, seductive, dangerous, and unforgettable. She rewrote the story of women in the empire, proving that even in a world built by men, a woman could hold the strings. And long after her laughter faded from the marble halls of Topkapi, the echo of her ambition still lingers, like a ghost that refuses to be silenced. The palace did not sleep after her death.